Hello, and a warm welcome to the latest episode of the AI Edge podcast presented by Leena AI. Today, we're being joined by Mr. Carlo Giovine, a partner at QuantumBlack, the AI practice of McKinsey. Welcome on the show, Carlo.
Thank you so much, Adit. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Amazing. To start us off, I'd love to make our listeners understand what Quantum Black does and what's your role at Quantum Black.
For sure. And so QuantumBlack is the essentially AI part of McKinsey. It's a company McKinsey acquired roughly, say, 10 years ago. It's a data science company that is now growing globally. And what do is we work with our clients to work with them on some of the essentially biggest and most complex problems that I have, and bring AI, and of course, in the last 3 years, a lot of generative AI applications to solve those problems in a way that is really value-based. And we do that with a team, which is a cross-functional team of some of the management consultants that come from essentially McKinsey, but also scientists and engineers that we have as part of Quantum Black. They will build those models, they will build those applications in the client context. That then will essentially get adopted by our clients' teams, both from some of the business users, but also some of the technical users. And so my role as a partner at Quantum Black, I lead those teams that do the work with our clients, but also have another role, which I essentially co-lead globally Quantum Black Labs, which are our labs for building some of the solutions that we bring to our clients. And some of them are things that we also have made essentially open sourced in the last years. You've seen the likes of Kedro, Visro, and a lot of things that we really try to give back to the community as we build those tools for ourselves and for our clients.
Lovely, Carlo. So if I was to just replay that back, you have the McKinsey consultants who are facing customers, looking at business problem customers face, and they come to you and say, hey, this is a specific business problem. How can we solve it using generative AI, agentic AI, data analytics, etc.? And then you have a team of scientists, technologists, data scientists, etc., who come together and train models, etc., to solve those problems for the end customer via, of course, the McKinsey depth in any industry as such, right?
That is correct. Yes, yes. And I think our true value is really being able to combine those worlds where we deeply understand our client industries and problems in the actual regulations and in the whole constraints, as well as we deeply understand the technology with our scientists and engineers, and so we can really bring the technology to solve those problems.
Amazing. Love it. So, with that out of the way, Carlo, we'd love to kind of jump in and talk a bit more about agentic AI. So, it's been all the buzz in the last 3 to 6 months. Everyone's talking about agentic AI, from Satya Nadella to, NVIDIA, everybody, Microsoft, NVIDIA, OpenAI, everyone's talking about agents and the rise of agent in the workplace. So, let's kind of first spend a few minutes to define what agentic AI really means, right? How is it different from Gen AI, and what would you define as an agent? I think in some of your blogs I was reading before this podcast, you mentioned a virtual coworker. So can you explain that for this audience here?
Of course. So, as you said, there is a lot of talks about agents and what's an agent. It's really something people may not really fully understand. But the way we look at it is agent. It is an actual solution that has agency. An agency, I mean, with it, the essential ability to make choices. And those essentially models and capabilities will do that through four things that they know how to do. One, they can perceive the actual environment in which they live, in which they do actually work. And that is when I speak about environment, I speak like about the idea that they can access tools, for example, the idea that they can gather informations around the environment. So they have an actual multimodality understanding of the world, that is text, images, video, audio, and so on and so forth. The second one is they can plan. And so you've seen, the reasoning elements of the agents and the idea that agents now are able to take a complex problem, break it in a bit of steps, and then go through each one of the steps essentially in a bit of a sequence. And so they have the actual planning ability. The third one is they can really use tools. So they don't just have access to them, but they can use them. They can call APIs. They can call some of the RAG tools that are essentially they make knowledge sort of available to them. They can write into systems, into actual data records. They can run code, and so they have all this ability to do things through tools. And the last one is they can learn and improve. And so by doing all of it, they will have a bit of an evaluation criteria or framework at the end of each one of the steps, or at the end of essentially a number of steps. They will be able to compare what they've gotten from what they've done compared to what they were meant to do, and therefore learn from that. And then change the way they plan, change the tools that they use, and so on and so forth. And of course, the humans also play a very strong element into the fourth step, where they can provide labels to those agents, where they can provide feedback after the output is essentially being produced. But agents in our world is something that has agency, and so it's the ability to make those choices, ability to navigate a complex environment, is the ability to create an actual complex output. And then we also see agents essentially living as single agents or working teams. And so I could talk a little bit about multi-agent teams, which is the more complex versions of agents.
Got it. So to summarize, it's basically four things that make them agents. The first is being multimodal, so they can. It's not just like one way they can interact with the world. It's multiple ways. Like it could be text, images, videos, voice. I believe, and then uh, I think one missed element of this is also that they could also be watching something every day, like emails or triggers, right? So that's, I think, in the last iteration of our own definition, Leena has definitions of agent, we kind of added that, where it is also trigger based. So you can, it's not just, it does not always have to be a human triggering an agent. It could be an event that could trigger. So I think that's the first part of it. The second, as you said, is the ability to break down complex things into smaller doable tasks and then going and following them one after the other. So there's a planning element to this, right? The chain of thought that you mentioned, chain of thought element to this. The third you mentioned was the ability to execute those planned steps via APIs slash RAG or knowledge tools, the bunch of available tools. I think even computer use or operator can by OpenAI can also become like tools. Okay. And the last, as you said, is the feedback loop, where we are saying, okay, if let's say using one of the tools you got an error, what do you do then, right? So that's basically where it is, learning again and again, and going back in loops to kind of learn and get better on the process, on the chain of thought. And maybe some human oversight and some human input is also kind of put into the step for to make it better and better. Is that a good summary, Carlo, for our listeners?
Yes, no, that's perfect. Uh, 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 I'd say agent is the word of, if you wish, essentially 2024, 2025. A lot of people have listened to the word that I think Microsoft initially introduced with the idea of having an AI copilot. And
Yeah.
so the difference between an agent versus an actual copilot is the agent, it is designed to have agencies and make its own decisions and try to complete the task itself. Was the actual idea of having an actual co-pilot, was the idea of giving humans a tool to be able to perform single tasks. And I think that is really the sort of the paradigm shift, where you're moving from human plus models for small tasks to an agent that can take more complex workflows.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I think the word agency here is the most important part. Like, it's not just a co-pilot to humans, where it's not just a tool like Excel for the humans. It has its own ability to go and do things as well, right? I think that makes
Precisely.
it makes a lot of sense, Carlo. Now, you defined single agents and multi-agent system. Now, that's again something that's becoming very interesting, and a lot of people are talking about it. Can you tell us how does that work? So there are two kinds of architectures that are available, right? Like you have single agents, all of them report to like an orchestrator or a mother or a father agent of sorts, right? That's the first architecture.
Hmm.
The second architecture is more like these agents can just speak to each other for things. They're directly connected with each other. So the difference in the architectures is that you go from one agent via to the other agent via an orchestrator, or you just directly go there, right? So like which one is it that you think is the prevalent, or which one do you think is a better architecture? Maybe nothing is better. There are different use cases for both of them. What's your view on how are these multi-agent systems kind of evolving?
Exactly. So you have agents, essentially single agents. Like typically, we see them able to perform one task or a small series of tasks that are typically very similar in the actual task in themselves. Um, and you have to and you can be very specific with a single agent about the kind of instructions the agent needs to follow, the kind of tools the agents can access, the kind of evaluation criteria the agents should use to essentially understand if the output of the actions was correct. Now, those are really good for this. As I said, these tasks are very clear. When you move into a process which is comprised on a number of multiple tasks, where there's a number of set instructions you have to do a different part of the process, eval especially, it's very important where quality of the individual part of the process, which could be a combination of tasks, it's not it's very different from other parts of the process. Therefore, you start naturally landing on multi-agent systems. We also see that multi-agent systems are very effective when they have to navigate a little bit more ambiguity in each individual part of the process, as well as being able to create a higher output, higher quality of output when you have a critique agent, which is forming the team of the planning agent, the agent that will do different tasks, and the critique itself, because the critique will be able to review outputs at individual parts of the complex workflows, as opposed to see the full output at the end of the workflow, which is very difficult to review, and then eventually change if you feel like that step specifically or series of steps didn't go as planned. So I think I would say both of them are valid approaches, agent as well as a multi-agent. Agent, it works very, very well when you have a very clear set of tasks. Multi-agents work very well within a complex process. And of course, yeah, having essentially a multi-agent approach, you increase the level of complexity, and so requires more management. But it can lead to higher accuracy.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Carlo, can you make this real for our audience here by giving an example of for which use case will you use a single agent versus for which use case will you use a multi-agent system?
Of course, so if you think about a simple task that I was describing. For example, if you have to go through, if you have to respond to one ticket for one of the essentially IT systems, you as a user may raise a ticket, and then you want something to be done on the back of the ticket, which typically is giving you access to a systems or checking a policy and so on and so forth. I mean, those things single agents are pretty well essentially suited for, because they play a role, which is the essentially manager, IT manager. They have access to a small set of tools. They've access to a small set of policies, which could be what tools can be or what systems can be granted access to essentially some individuals. And so that is very, very clear and prescribed, and having a single agent works very well. But if you then move into processes that are much more complex, say you're a bank and you have to build essentially a credit risk memo for one large corporate clients, when you giving them a sizable lending amount, for example, because they need a loan for a new capital project, it requires a very high number of checks that you have to do at the level of documentations and the level of essentially their own annual reports, the news in the industry about our clients, the geography, policy regulations, and and it's a very complex set of steps. And I think giving all of this context to a single agent, it is quite challenging because the agent itself will have to use a very long list of tools. Will have to really understand how to break down the problems in a very complex set of steps. And so we see that in our work with our clients, multi-agent systems do actually perform well in this case. When you really understand the workflow or the process from the client point of view, if you break it down as teams of agents. And actually, we see the same when we think about some of the legacy code-based migration processes, where you have, say, for example, a very large state of code base, which could be in, I don't know, Java 7, and you wanna improve it to maybe Java 17, which is the latest versions of Java, for example, that the clients want to use, this whole process of taking an actual legacy code base and migrating into a modern code base, it's actually a very complex process. You need to understand how the code was structured. You need to think about testing. You need to think about some of the function requirements. You need to understand what is target architecture you're building it is on, the frameworks, and so on and so forth. And so again, one single agent may not be well suited, but as we see with our clients, as we're doing this kind of work with our clients, we see that teams of multi-agent are actually better suited for the task.
That makes a lot of sense, Carlo. I can second that. So we at Leena, we do a lot of internal help desk automation in IT, HR, finance, and our architecture currently has a single agent for every department. As you said, what we are also seeing is as we go deeper and deeper and deeper and try to do more of what an typical IT team does, or a typical HR team does, or a typical finance team does, we are also hitting the limits of current LLMs, because see, they can't carry context forever, right? So as soon as the number of tools, number of use cases, number of knowledge that they have access, as it continues to keep growing, you realize at some point that you have to now add more agents within IT, within HR, within finance, and make it a multi-agent system. I think that makes a lot of sense, Carlo, and great examples. Thank you so much for that. Let's kind of quickly, now that we have defined an agent, we have defined when you choose a single agent or a multi-agent system. Let's dive deep into your work with your customers and clients, and tell us a few. You've already given us a couple of use cases, with the IT help with automation, with the bank, loan disbursement process, and even the code base upgradation. So you've given us three use cases already, but give us a few recent practical things that you actually implemented with your clients or customers, and or in the process of implementing, and what's the ROI that you've already gotten or you are looking forward to getting in those clients and customers as well.
Yes, of course. So things that was essentially walking through in my example before, what actually things that we're doing with our clients today. We can see there already 30 to 40 to get to essentially about 50% time reductions for a human to complete the same process. Because
Wow.
when you have a complex process like the ones I was describing, it takes a multi humans to go through the process, to the checks and validations. Typically, in the actual banking board, you have multiple roles. You have the corporate banker, you have the risk officer. If you think about the legacy, some of the legacy examples that I was giving, you'll have different types of software engineering, architects, some of the infra guys. And so this is a very complex problem. There is a lot of handoffs, a lot of knowledge you need to extract from people's heads. And even it's not just the time saving, which is sizable. We're measuring this now with our clients that are using some of those things as a pilot or even in the actual production environments. But the actual consistency that you could get out of this process, surprisingly could be higher. than having a team of human just going through similar cases in two different teams, and we can see even when a process becomes really complex, really understanding what is the ground truth, what is the right answer, what is the label, what is the golden label that the model should essentially be able to produce to say the job was done correctly. It's actually really difficult to define because
Yeah.
those teams of humans will go through the same process and come up with different answers. And so this is a very complex processes that we see not only the impact in time reductions, but also in the actual consistency of the models producing the output itself.
Yeah, we are also saying, like, you're basically saying we are saying better quality outputs and consistency of quality as well in the output. I think that makes a lot of sense. We've kind of been seeing that as well, like internally, when you go to a customer, right? The customer does not just buy agents and or subscribes to agents, not just because they want automation, but because they want consistency. Because if you look at having IT agents, and if you look at having humans, like human IT agents and human HR agents and finance people, their outputs might, like, the same question can be answered differently by 20 different people, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. But you were doing it at a much larger scale of very large processes, and you're seeing the same, which is, I think that that's the true value. Apart from the efficiency and the productivity gains, I think that's the true value of using a system with agency in it. That makes sense, Carlo. What are the common challenges? You mentioned three use cases. So what are the common challenges you faced while implementing these use cases in your enterprise customers or clients?
Yeah, I feel like so for clients that are trying to use those tools and solutions in moving to agents, I think the common challenge will be one, the scope is too broad. They don't really understand exactly how agents work, and maybe take a problem that is very, very broad. And so I think you really need to be focused on the workflows that you want to automate, the process that you really want to power with agents, and the role the agents can play. The second one, I think it's partly a little bit linked to the actual technology. And so there is a lot of technology choices in the market. You need to be clear on what different tools and technology can do or not do, and how bespoke is your workflow compared to some of the workflows that are coming out of they're already essentially defined in some of those platforms that can offer those workflow for finance or for HR or for IT. And um, and as soon as you start hitting the fact that those workflows can be very scripted and you may have a little different workflow, configure those agents to operate in your context, it could become a little bit more challenging. And so you really need to think about, how is my process different from a common workflow, and what is the degree of flexibility that I need when I choose technology to be able to accommodate that. Um, I think there's another element of like um, development and DevOps in a way. So those agents are, in reality, it takes very little to build an agent, the level of instructions, evals, the level of tools. I think it's very important to get into this mindset of um, continuous monitoring and learning. And so you build the first 0.01 MVP. You have a essentially dedicated team of humans that are doing this process that can work with those agents, and you work in a bit of a mode where in the first, say, 2 to 3 months, you constantly changing those agents on a daily essentially basis, and so you're improving them very quickly. And so the first deployment may not be um, uh, you know as good as you thought it would be, but after a couple of months, you will see a real improvement. And frankly, a lot of the actual improvements don't come only from better prompting or better set of instructions or better labels you can give to the agents, but eventually will also come from your data as well as your knowledge. And so companies, by going through this process, will discover that their knowledge bases may not be up to the task. And so they will also need to work on the knowledge bases to to essentially be able to clarify things for for the agents. The humans were a little bit more used to navigate because they knew the faults in knowledge base. And then I feel like maybe the last one is in reality, um, as you build those agents workflows, there's a lot of elements that you can port from one workflow to the other workflow. And I think clients are a little bit siloed in the way they think about those agents workflows. But they need to see the bigger picture of I'm investing a little bit more at the beginning. But as I learn on how to scale agents, as I learn on how to configure technology, as I improve my knowledge bases, there's a huge amount of reuse, even when you bleed across processes. And so, for example, before I was talking about the credit process in banking, but actually processing some of the reports from companies is a problem that is broadly used across many different areas of banking. For example, when you think about talking to your clients and be able to prepare the meetings for your clients, or when you think about some of the know your customer processes you have to onboard, or you have to review your customers. And so the idea of processing documents and keeping a tidy report knowledge base, it's quite powerful and can apply across different domains. So I think when you think about agents, also build this in a way that is scalable, reusable, because that will accelerate your agent deployment.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Carlo. So let's kind of go a little bit deeper in one of those topics. So you mentioned, launching quickly and then like saying that, okay, I launched the 0.01 version and then I'm improving it every day, to go and solve my specific task. Don't make it too broad, keep it focused, is also what you said. But even then, you release something quickly and then keep improving it day by day instead of saying that, okay, I'm going to do a waterfall in like 180 days, right? So when you're doing this and you're saying that, okay, the improvement actually is also coming from improvement in data quality, right? And
Right.
some of those investments are scalable because they can be used across multiple processes as well. So how do you do that? I think one of the biggest challenges we face when we go into a customer is that there is knowledge is everywhere. They have knowledge from 20 years ago and currently as well, be it structured or unstructured. That's the problem that we face, on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure that's what you're talking about as well. So how do you solve for this at QuantumBlack? Like, what's the way to scalably solve this to get them to a level where the solution starts to give them ROI? And then maybe it's also about creating a process that the customer can follow, the client can follow, to keep following that process and keep making sure that the knowledge created is also good and as per the standards required for AI.
Yeah. So thank you for the question, Adit. I feel like data is always been a problem in the industry, not just for some of GenAI applications, but of course also when we were building and still are building some of the machine learning models for our clients, which can drive value across a number of domains. Um, and as I was saying at the very beginning, when I spoke about my role, I have two roles. One is I work with our clients, but the other one I also co-lead a place where we build solutions that we bring to our clients. And so as part of my QuantumBlack Labs, we have been building over the years the solutions, which is called essentially AI for data quality (DQ), and the solution is able now to help us with the two data worlds. One is the actual structured data, which was where we were spending more time before, and the level of anomalies and the level of some of the linkage across data sets, at the level of consistency. And so a solution that can use machine learning models to look at all those elements and dimensions and improve the underlying data quality. But now that we have a lot of unstructured data, we also extended the same solutions to help us with that data. And essentially, the way we do it is by a number of things. The first one is we will look at for every single document. We will look at the metadata that the document has itself. And when I say metadata, I mean the author, the versioning, the timestamps, the context of the document itself, and the labeling. So because as we catalog documents in folder structures, or as we catalog documents in processes, of course, some additional labels that are attached to the document. And so through our tools, we're able to assess the quality of that metadata and being able to, essentially signal where the gaps are, and therefore companies can work on those. But also we also have tools that help us to close those gaps, and so we can create the metadata from the underlying documents. We can link documents together, structure as well as unstructured data sets. Um, and I think it's fairly important as you was referencing, and we understand that there are gaps in the knowledge base. We see that working on those gaps will produce much higher lift than continue to improve the prompting or some of the guidelines for agents or evaluation frameworks. I think it's very important that we give them a reasonably clean, reasonably searchable knowledge base, because through that they can provide higher quality answers.
No, I think this is amazing, Carlo. And is this work that you have open sourced?
Not yet. That is unfortunately not yet open sourced, but we do bring it to our clients as we do the work for them. Yes.
Amazing. Love it. So for the listeners here, like quickly summarizing the last 10 minutes of conversation. So these are the challenges that you talked about, right? And the first is that clients and customers, they're thinking too big out of the gate, right? So they need to, like, if you are a CXO, you need to say, okay, AI is going to do a lot of things, but let me start smaller at a specific problem area, and then I'll scale from there, right? So bounding the problem to a specific KPI, KRA that you want to achieve, instead of saying, okay, just improve my procurement, right? So that's number one. Number two is taking a deep hard look at the workflows as well. And you're very right. So as a technology partner to our customers, we provide a lot of out of box stuff. But at the end of the day, what McKinsey uses as a IT help desk or as a procurement process might be different from what PNG or give a name, right? Estee Lauder uses, right? So you got to say that, okay, how much of what Leena is providing or any other technology service provider is providing is applicable to me, and what all configurations need to be done. Uh, and sometimes if I extend what you just said, Carlo, maybe it's also time for organizations to say, hey, maybe some of my processes don't work in the realm of AI, right? And I need to change. We have actually had a couple of our customers. One of them is persistent systems. They actually changed their approval processes for their overall IT help desk to be able to kind of move much faster from an AI perspective, right? They literally, so they had forms which required like 20 different things to fill out in a simple IT help desk setting. And Carlo, they actually said, okay, hold on the deployment. Let's take a month and just clean out some of these forms first, right? And then the agents, the IT agent that they got from us, it's like performing really, really well. So that's the second part that you said. The third is you said, don't do a waterfall. Get something out the gate quickly, and then keep innovating and keep building every single day and releasing new and better agents. And then you said is in one of those cycles, it's not just about improving on the agents and the models. It's also about improving on your data quality, which might be structured, unstructured, and for that you've built solutions that help people identify gaps in their knowledge, and and you also help them patch it actually using technology itself. So that's one big part of the puzzle that you is now solvable with technology. It's not just about saying that, okay, your knowledge is bad. It's about, hey, can we actually take that and improve it using AI as well? And I think all of this beautifully comes together with constant monitoring at the end. Is that what you would say are the challenges, and how enterprises should look at deploying agents?
Yes, I think it's. Thank you for doing this well-done recap. I think maybe the one point which is very important that we really often stress with our clients is you have to think about an actual domain transformation. So don't take a single use case view. You say, okay,
Mhm.
how can I do this task better? Because even if you solve it, then it's not going to drive the value that you expect it will drive. And to your point, the processes that we have now in place today are not optimized for AI agents and optimized for automation end to end. Only if you take a domain view, an end-to-end process, which is meaty, an actual workflow, and you take that lens, then you can automate the process, but change the process itself. So I think there is a bit of a trap in looking at tasks and say, okay, this is not driving value, but reality, you only drive value if you take an end-to-end process and a domain transformation.
Got it. So if you were to, so because this kind of contradicts with what we said earlier, right? Like we said, hey, we want to have a specific use case and specific problem. So you're saying that take one meaty process and then do it. Is that what you're saying? Because functions can
Yes,
be, people will just get lost if you say, hey, solve procurement, like then I think enterprise will just get lost.
I think it's really striking the right balance. If
Okay.
you're too broad, it's not going to work. You cannot implement it. If you're too narrow, it can work for that specific task, but then it doesn't drive value. And
ROI.
so, and so the way that we look at this is we look at workflows. Workflows for us are like end-to-end processes that can have an output that you can evaluate at the end, but typically requires uh, essentially teams of humans, requires days, maybe weeks, at times even months to complete those processes. But it's a process, it's a complex workflow in one single domain. And you think about the domain, say, for example, call center transformation. Call center transformations, if you just solve the agent, copilot elements of the equation, you may make those agents, search through content faster, but you may not make them able to essentially drive a lot of value, which you will do if you think about how do you change the actual customer experience through voice or chatbots. How do you think about fulfillment on the back of the agent completing some operations with the customers? And so you have to take a complex process, little bit of domain transformation view, but you cannot be too broad, otherwise you won't be able to like measure the output and continue to improve.
So to kind of say it in other words, it would be that, hey, I want to do a domain transformation, but I gotta start at a meaty workflow, not go too small, but start at a meaty workflow, and then I'll pick multiple ones as I go, right? Like in banking or yeah, I'm closer to internal stuff. So let me give you an example of that. So in procurement, let me take the process of raising a PR and PO, because that's a I want to do domain transformation in procurement, but let me start off with the process of raising a PR and PO. That typically starts when you have decided that you have the budget, you have decided that you want to do something to solve that problem of yours, and that's when you actually come to the. So it's not the entire process, it's not the entire function, but it is a meaty part of the process that you get, and then you can transform that. So instead of taking from the day you want to raise it till the PO, it's not like 6 months, but like 6 days, right? So that is that kind of what you mean, Carlo?
Yeah. In that context, for example, just using your analogy and example, I would not take the whole functional procurement, but I take one process, which is, for example, order to cash, right?
What is
So
it?
the end-to-end process, and as a requires quite a lot of steps, requires quite a lot of checks and balances, a lot of like regulations maybe or systems interactions, and so that is one good unit of analysis.
Love it, love it, love it, Carlo. So take a process and then do it end to end. Makes sense. Now I know we are about to come on time, but I really want to touch upon one big area for all of our listeners here, which is, see, AI before Gen AI was a black box enough. Now Gen AI came in, and now Agentic AI has come in. So it's a big big box for business users and people who are not technologists in general, right? Um, and I'm in meetings all day long where people are worried about transparency and trust, especially in agentic AI systems, where they're saying, hey, because now it has agency, as per your definition, Carlo, it has now got agency. So how can I trust that agency is always going to be used for following my processes or following good business principles, what if it goes rogue? So what's your what's your take on this? How do you think agentic AI systems can provide transparency into that agency or into that decision making, those decisions, as you said, it takes as it goes. So how can you think that we can come to a place, or what are you doing today to come to a place where the customers are comfortable with this?
Yeah, look, this is a great question, and I think it's the most challenging question. It's a question where we're still learning a lot as we deploy and scale the systems. I would say there are three levels of um, things that you need to look at. So one is the system level, which is how do you how do you look at the output that has been created by those agent or multi-agent systems? And so the final output. Um, you could also look at the confidence levels of that output. The second one is at the level of agents, individual agents, and so you can look at those. Each one of those agents will have their reasoning, their own decisions that they have made, the output that they've created, and so you can put some checks and balances for agents, at the agent level, especially for the agents where the risk is higher, right? And the third level is each single call that you make those models, some of the large language models. Now, this is very expensive. You think about the level of extra scrutiny and time you need to invest. Um, but again, there may be some very critical steps, operations, or calls that you're making that you really want to monitor. And so, and and as the system becomes more complex, more agents, more teams, more loops between those teams and workflows, it becomes more complex to monitor. But you have to think about those three levels: the system level, the agent level, at the large language model level, and define the right guardrails and checks and balances that you want to monitor. And what I've seen also with clients is um, trust, which is what you're trying to build. It essentially what also happens in steps, and so you may want to take a complex workflow, break into like teams, and then having humans look after each single team or even agents, within the team at the very beginning. And as they, fine tune them, as they improve them, as they create more evals for those agents to use and understanding that they're doing the right things, then you're building also trust in humans, and eventually you can move for a less scrutiny, which of course will make the process more efficient. So that's a little bit about what we've seen so far, but it's a learning, and I would say we're still a little bit early uh, from saying that we have cracked this problem.
Got it. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it is very early in agentic AI for sure. To come up and say that we have solved for transparency and trust. So, Carlo, moving on to my last question from you, and that's going to be, I think it's pretty interesting because it's very common these days with agentic AI having agency, or with agents having agency. Uh, One of the biggest fear is people are going to lose jobs, right? Um, is it just that a fear? How do you handle that with your customers? What are your clients thinking about it? And how do you talk about this when it comes up?
Yeah, so of course, Agentic AI or AI as a whole, it is a transformative technology. It's going to change the industry. We as McKinsey, as part of our own research, we have estimated about between 2.8 and 4.4 trillions in value that this technology can actually realize across all industries globally. Um, it will take some time. Um, we're still at the very beginning of it. We still haven't seen some of the 10% growth in the whole economy globally, which I think Satya was referencing essentially a few days ago.
Uh,
Um, we we feel like there are objectively tasks today that um, uh, are essentially done by humans, but can be and will be taken away from some of those technologies. But equally, we feel like because humans have to take care of those tasks and maybe the quote unquote the simpler cases, if I go back to some examples that I was mentioning before, they may be spending less time on, thinking about the more complex cases because we have a set of teams which is constrained by their own capacity. And so I think in the first instance, what's going to happen is the quality of the output of those companies is going to increase because we're going to have more people deployed against the most complex problems. For example, in the call center, you can take the more complex questions where your customers are really struggling with very specific issues and guide them a bit step by step, right, without having to wait for a long time on your phone. So there's one example. In the future, I feel like as we deploy more and more of those technologies, we will discover new roles that we can play with, with AI. I think we're moving from a bit of co-pilot users to coaches of the AI, but the human competence will really think about some of the system level issues and look at the cases where the AI is, it's not really working properly, edge cases, and produce more knowledge, produce more solutions, produce more knowledge bases to really address those cases. So I feel like our role may also change, but
Yeah.
again, it's very early, and I think in our report that we published essentially a few weeks ago, which is about the human super agency in the actual workplace, we actually noticed that employees are three times more three times essentially more keen to use AI technology than the leaders essentially believe they are.
Wow.
And so I think the change uh, uh, is also happening within organizations, and we sort of not fully understand the actual desire of some of the people that perform tasks to use AI um, to help them be able to perform those tasks more effectively. So I think it's a very tough question. We're still learning. I think the next 2 to 3 to 5 years will be quite critical for us to see how it's going to play out. But there is a lot that we can do with AI
Yeah.
before not n- not being part of the industry anymore, which I don't think is going to happen very soon.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, Carlo. I think this is the same thing that we've also been seeing. I think things that humans should not be doing, uh, I think those will go away. But in overall totals, people will be doing so much more than less and that's what technology has taught us in the last 200 years of industrial growth, and I think that's just going to continue with AI as well. But very well said, and I really thank you for taking out the time and doing this with us today. I think this was a great for anyone who is trying to build agentic AI systems for their own companies, use them or think about using them as well. So thank you so much for doing this, Carlo. I'd love to have you again after some time and take an update as this overall field evolves. But thank you so much.
For sure. And it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.